beauty. You've heard the pitch, ditch the toxins, go natural, problem solved. But who actually defined clean and by what standard? The body doesn't read labels, it reads biology. And that biology doesn't care how green the label is. In today's case file, The Missing Metric, we uncover whether clean is a revolution or just a rebrand. This is where the investigation begins. Lauren, I think any woman or man, we're not going to discriminate here, who's listening to this podcast episode can resonate with walking down the beauty aisle, and maybe they have decided to commit to a better wellness plan. And they have realized that their topical products, whether it be skincare, body products, shampoos, needs to go through a clean check as well. And so because they may not have a very strong reference right now for what clean is, they're looking for those labels, the little bunny or the organic label. And they are assuming that that is enough for passing the clean test. If it has this label, then it must be good. I have fallen into that camp many times over until I started diving deeper into what does the organic label mean? What does the cruelty-free label mean? And more importantly, how does that actually impact the biological terrain? Because we see one thing on the label thinking that just because it's marked clean, that it's good and that it is safe.
Yeah, to really set the tone for the entire conversation, when you say, what does the label leave out? We can really zero in on nature, and you are nature, and all of the ingredients that we get come from nature, even though they can go through man-made poops and turn into synthetics. But it all comes from nature, and nature is systemic, and it's interoperable, and it works together. And when you single things out and you take things out of their proper relationship and their interchange, then you have a disconnect. And that, I think, is the main problem with green, where green is trying to do that and trying to acknowledge the system and make sure everyone is safe and every animal is safe and everything has a sanctuary and everything is perfect, but it just falls short in the calculation of the system.
It does fall short because, like you said, they're looking at the animal safety, the environmental impact, but no one's really asking, how is this product impacting the human terrain? And I don't think that it is deniable that the environment has become very toxic because of the different types of herbicides, chemical compounds used on the agricultural system. And most of the natural products are in fact botanicals, plants, those things that are going to take up some of the toxins that are being sprayed, or maybe even a soil that is heavily depleted due to the different agricultural processes. And a lot of these groups, the environmental working group, different groups like that, they're looking at it from good, bad. It's not taking into account the whole picture. The beauty industry is a $205 billion industry. That's a huge amount of money. So profits are most likely going to be at the forefront of what is considered clean because it's a system that needs to stay running. Some of the different organizations that are in charge of determining whether or not something is clean or earth-friendly is EcoCert, Cosmos, Environmental Working Group, the Leaping Bunny, which is the little cute rabbit that's cruelty-free. All of these groups were formed with the mindset of agriculturists who are looking at it from a chemical perspective, looking at environment, they're looking at toxicology. Nowhere within these groups are they looking at the biology and the biological consequences or potential concerns of how these products could be interfering with our terrain on a bigger level. Also, the FDA doesn't have any metric in place for what is safe enough. There's no real hard, rigorous testing.
Right. And it is set up so the industry kind of polices itself so
Mhm.
that billions and billions of dollars can flow in a certain way because it then becomes an insider trend. This is good. That's bad. We all are doing this because this is saving all of us and all of the animals and making everyone feel good. And we've decided together we don't like it. It's bad. So
Right.
that becomes the disconnect when nobody really realizes that they're disconnected. Like you said, it doesn't take into account the terrain framework and also the biological behavior that every ingredient is creating within you and within your system.
Yeah. And also, when it comes to application, 90% of the products that we have, we use daily. We use multiple products. So you're looking at a very diverse cocktail that you're putting on the skin, thinking, okay, this is clean, this is good, this is okay because it merits a label. And it all has a compound cumulative effect. And most people are not metabolically flexible. Their body is not operating as the system is intended. And so when you're putting these mass amount of products on a daily basis onto your skin, that is an accumulation. So even if it's quote unquote clean or environmental friendly, the more you have on the surface and on the layer, because the skin is the largest organ of the body and it's permeable, it penetrates. All these products are coming into the terrain.
Yeah. When you talk about the terrain, you're talking about a disruption of your body's mechanisms because you're disrupting intricate balances within the system.
Yeah.
And that is the part of it, I think, that the beauty industry really isn't educated about. And so they go straight to the toxicology, and then it becomes a game of attacking the intruder versus strengthening
The
the
host.
being,
The
which
being.
Morley Robbins loves to teach both of us, where he's like, don't focus on the guest, um, focus on you so that you can metabolize properly and you're not necessarily always going out and trying to combat these dirty things and seeking clean things because I can't
Mhm.
handle it. Your body, when you're metabolically flexible, you're able to stay in homeostasis and hormetically balanced in the world. You were designed for that. So, not to say that I'm on the train of like, who cares about toxins, but it is more efficient and deeper clean to focus on the self as being systematically balanced so that when things come at you from the environment, you're not necessarily derailed from it.
To piggyback off of that, your point of being internally strong and metabolically flexible, when you are in that position, you'll need less of those green friendly natural products. The things
Yeah.
that you're going to start to use are going to be heavily pared down to often whole complex things that the body can use. And so you won't have to be searching for ways to reverse time and fill in that wrinkle and combat aging, because aging comes from oxidative stress, the body's inability to properly metabolize oxygen. And when that can't happen, you run down the slippery slope of inflammation.
Yeah. And I mean, as a formulator, because my formulations are informed by these principles that we're sharing
Mhm.
with you today, I am so lo fi, almost embarrassingly, about skincare and beauty because I focus on the total picture and beauty inputs beyond just what I use as skincare. It is every habit that I cultivate
Yeah.
from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to sleep, and even in between when I am sleeping. So it's very much so an addiction. It becomes an addiction to want to fix with something outside of yourself, and then to want to make sure that it's good and clean and won't add to the mess. And it's very metabolically unsound in a way.
The listener may not know how to get to the point of metabolic stability. And if you stay long enough with us, you will begin to hear that, and it gets easier. We all have to go through this sequence of learning, adjusting, learning, adjusting. I've done that so many times over myself. At one point, I thought I had all the answers for what was clean, and then my world gets rocked. And I'm like, oh, wait, okay, no, I need to go down this path. To your point, though, I'm like you. People ask me all the time, what do you do to your skin? And I feel like I should have this response of a lot of things. To be honest with you, I'm in the same camp. My routines are my form of skincare. And I really like don't use, sometimes I'm not even cleansing the face. I also don't really wear a lot of makeup or anything like that. But what I do use is so intentional, and it's a complement to my lifestyle habits. And when you flip that order, instead of skincare and then lifestyle habits, things get easier. And I'm also going to toot our own horn because Lauren and I are in the 50 club. So I think we're a testament, you know, to what we're preaching, because you can't find that in a bottle, whether it be a supplement bottle that you orally take or a skincare product. Those all should be complements.
Yeah, it's like when you're younger and you're just getting into beauty, you're actually just using products because they're fun.
Yeah,
And that is how you should be living your life in every decade. And that's how I do. I use products because they're fun, but I'm minimalist about it. And
right.
then if I have to throw in a weird chemical or supernatural hair product, because hair products that are natural are kind of a mess. You
Yeah,
have
it's,
to
yeah,
go chemical. I mean, a lot of green people who are obsessed with green beauty are constantly dyeing their hair, and they will put everything on the back burner and be like, these chemicals, I don't care. Persistent chemicals, don't, who cares?
yeah. We don't want extremism here. You don't want to live in a bubble. Your body should be able to metabolize toxins, kind of flipping back to our opening point where I'm talking about you constantly are applying 90% of the products that you have, you're applying. And if your body is not metabolically flexible, those products are going to be harder to um, move as exhaust out of the body.
Yeah, it's definitely a yes and equation. And this brings us back to, what we talked about in the beginning, which is like a system um, in which the green metrics don't take into account. They are trying to take the system into account. These are persistent chemicals. And it mirrors what we just spoke about. When you have a toxin and you can metabolize it in your own system, then you're good. And you're not going to get persistent chemicals in your internal environment. In the same way that the environment of nature functions, those persistent chemicals, when you have nature set up regeneratively, they know how to recycle and how to renew. It's when you start compartmentalizing and separating everything out, then it is unable to process and metabolize those persistent chemicals. It's very much so, as within, as without. It's the exact same thing. And that's really at the crux of the missing metric.
Yeah.
And I want to mention there's an article
Mm.
by an author named Andrew French, the most vegan item in the supermarket. And this is such an amazing article because it kind of flips plant-based and the obsession with the cleanliness of diet on its head, because it points out that when you disrupt the system, you end up disrupting what you're trying to save without realizing it. And so to his title of his article, it says the most vegan thing in the supermarket is a grass-fed burger. Um,
Triggering,
yeah,
triggering, trigger.
right. And it was a really viral article because it was so triggering, but he did the math on it, and his mathematical argument is one grass-fed steer yields 450 pounds of beef, and it's one intentional death. And
Mhm.
that is contrasted with a monocrop. So when you disrupt the system, a monocrop, and you're making the crops for your vegan burger, your soys, your lentils, your peas, your corn, all of these plant-based monocrops, you are having to clear and separate the natural terrain. And so to that one animal that is producing 450 pounds of food, there are so many other unintentional deaths that stack up from agriculturally growing monocrops. It's the coyotes, it's the deer, it's the moles, it's the owls, it's the snakes, it's the bees, it's the bugs. Even though you can argue and say, well, organic is paying attention to the bees. What are you talking about? But you're absolutely disrupting. It's the microbes in the soil. You're absolutely disrupting everything that's working in concert for the good of the monocrop. And while it's growing, you have to tend to it with the pesticides, and then you have
Mhm.
to fend off any animal in the system that's like, hey, don't mind if I do enjoy the system of nature here. And the farmer is at constant war with these animals. And there's a lot going on behind the scenes that make the scales of care for nature absolutely skewed, absolutely imbalanced. And you might as well have a regenerative farm where everything is interwoven in how it expresses, and the soil renews itself, and the animals feed the soil and the soil feed the animals, and everything is cyclical. That is more how the earth was designed to run. And that type of green hasn't yet made it into the definition of the beauty industry standard green.
Very isolated, doesn't take into consideration harmonic,
No,
right? Which,
no,
yeah, the body
one
also.
note.
I mean, you start isolating things out. I tell my clients all the time, isolated products, isolated lifestyle equals isolated results because it does not encompass the whole picture.
Yeah.
And to your point, that's not how nature works. In all of the great information that you just delivered, I don't want to assume that someone knows what monocropping is, but monocropping is where they take one single thing, whether it be corn, wheat, and they just plant that thing over and over again. They don't rotate the soil. So the soil becomes depleted over time. It's minerally void. And so the nutrients that should be in said plant, said corn matters because it has a lot to do with some of the ingredients that are used in skincare, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But those things that are harvested are missing nutrients, which is a big deal. We just assume, oh, this plant, yay, plant nutrients, great. But if we're pulling those plants from monocropping, it's not going to be the same thing because it's not a diverse ecosystem.
And this monocropping, when you say that the soil is not being properly cared for because it's not giving sufficient turnover, that is a direct mirror to your internal metabolic balance. Your mineral balance will become heavy metal. And in terms of monocropping, that heavy metal byproduct is happening because the soil, even though it's an organic process, that soil is not being used in the way that nature uses it. It's being overridden by man's process of monocropping. All plants are
Yeah.
designed to clean the earth and the soil, and they work in tandem with the soil interoperably and clean the soil. So there is an element of heavy metal in every single botanical.
That actually becomes increased heavy metals and mineral depletion of the plant when that soil is so degraded. Then things like NPK fertilizer has to be used, which is a nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And if you look a little bit more deeper into that, they say every plant needs it. But again, this type of
Mm.
fertilizer is going to be added because there's a deficit going on, but there's so many other minerals that are needed as well. And so you begin to try and correct the problem from the soil with isolated ingredients, the same way that a lot of people try to do this to the surface of the skin. They say, oh, well, I'm low in this, or even internally with supplements, I'm low in zinc, need to take a ton of zinc, not realizing that there is a consequence to that. And also, when the fertilizer or the natural soil is not in a diverse, healthy state, you're going to struggle with bug resistance. And the fact is that organic crops still are sprayed. They're still sprayed with things. And
They're still sprayed, but then they're also, what they're not being sprayed by is intruding on them from the farm 3 farms down because of the way
yeah,
that nature works in concert. So if they're not being sprayed, but they're in a farming town and everything else is being sprayed, they're going to share.
one of the other agricultural products that I also think of, which is a big deal and it's not really talked about, is glyphosate.
Yeah.
So, gl- uh, talking about corn, genetically modified corn, Lauren and I are going to talk a little bit about vitamin C, which, if you've listened to our first 2 episodes, we do talk about ascorbic acid, vitamin C, and then also a really popular product that is added to even clean beauty items, which is xanthan gum. And those things are derived from corn, and 92% of the corn in the United States is genetically modified. Glyphosate is used to counteract the effects of bug resistance, and a lot of the genetically modified crops are thought to ward that off naturally, the penetration of infestation of bugs. But it kind of creates this super bug, and so glyphosate is needing to be sprayed on corn. The big deal on glyphosate is that it strips minerals from the soil. And if you look into the history of glyphosate, it was actually patented by the Stauffer Chemical Company. It was initially used as an industrial chelating agent or scrubber for industrial pipes. And so it has an affinity to grab minerals. And when we're talking about our own terrain, internal as well as external, we are mineral dependent. Hormones in the body are made from minerals. And so if you are using these products that are derived from things that are genetically modified, the question becomes, how can that not be impacting the product that you are putting on your skin? Going back to the glyphosate, it was initially used as a chemical chelating agent, but then it was actually repatented, I think like around 1971 by Monsanto, because they realized that it had herbicidal effects. And so that's when it actually became an agricultural product and began being used in our food system. So if it was initially designed to chelate or bind minerals, and then you have beauty products that are utilizing xanthan gum and ascorbic acid, vitamin C, the products that were being sprayed, it's this trickle down effect, and that's not really talked about in the working groups like the environmental working group or these eco certs, they just think, oh, it's clean. But these are the questions that need to come up. This is the body of work that people really need to discuss, because all of this stuff is flying under the radar, and we're having more health issues, more skin issues that need solving and solving and solving and solving.
So those skin issues are indicative of systemic issues. And take, for example, the ascorbic acid that Heidi was mentioning. So, ascorbic acid is derived from monocropped industrial corn. And that is what people don't understand when they see the Cosmos or the EcoCert label on their green product. They don't understand that it came from a highly disruptive crop that not only disrupts the system, is not really technically a food because it's so genetically modified, but it also disrupts the environment from top to bottom. And it is a persistent chemical. I would say
Right.
corn in the United States of America as a subsidized crop is a persistent chemical, full stop. And
Yeah.
nobody is calling out that elephant in the room. And so when you derive ascorbic acid in a lab from corn, then you're going to have a molecule of vitamin C that does not contain the tyrosinase in the center, which is a copper molecule. And that lack of tyrosinase is going to then contribute to your systemic persistent chemicals inside of your system, because you're going to be behind the eight ball in your oxygen metabolism. And that means
Yeah.
oxidative stress. And that means the exact thing that you are applying your products to fix or combat. And the reason why I say that, or how I can explain further, is copper needs to chaperone iron in your system. And if you don't have copper that's bioavailable, then iron is going to get dysregulated. And when iron gets dysregulated, then that means that oxidative stress isn't used in proper timing and iron isn't mobilized in proper timing. It goes haywire. And now we're back at exhaust, what we mentioned in episode 2. And exhaust
Aging.
is aging, itis, inflammation, all of it, oxidative stress. So, really, this vitamin C serum that everyone's like, yay, it's brightening, it's working, but is it on a systemic level? Not really. The the data says no. It says that it might be
Right.
maybe a persistent chemical in the eyes of the system. It's safe. It's safe. It's not a poison, but could it technically moonlight as a poison because of its disruption? Possibly, that's what everybody is missing.
Yeah. And so if you go to the environmental working group and you look up ascorbic acid, it's going to say that it is safe. But again, by whose standards? It's not people who are deeply understanding the terrain and what is needed in order to keep that internal terrain of the human body well regulated.
Back to what we were saying in episode 2, vitamin C is a complex, and the word complex is plural. And the reason why it's plural is because that vitamin is a verb. It's vitamining in your body using enzymatic processes in step. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's multiple steps to this enzymatic process, this complex verb. And if you have an isolated nutrient, your body is going to scramble and make shift and make do for the materials that aren't present in the compound and take it from your backlog, your actual biological stash. And that's really where you could say, is she really serious? Is vitamin C a poison? I don't mean it in a literal sense, but if you're working in the factory of your enzymatic processes, you're going to be like, hey, excuse me, yo, this is poisoning us. All right. We don't have any materials. What are you doing? Because you're not providing the full scope. And that is totally shoved under the rug in any conversation of what's good, what's clean, what's preferred.
Right. Well, from a toxicology perspective, based on everything that you just said, that vitamin C that's an ascorbic acid that's missing tyrosinase, copper at its core, that's being used to transport the iron copper together so the body can actually make energy and clear exhaust. If that's not happening, that's an internal toxicology. Nobody's reporting on that internal toxicology that's happening from these fragmented or isolated ingredients that aren't the whole terrain, aren't the whole picture. So maybe looking at toxicology from a different angle instead of natural, because technically natural doesn't even have a legal definition, right? It's a marketing term. There's no real safety in natural, but we hear natural and we go, oh God, natural, nature. You can extract a natural oil, and as long as it contains a small bit of that essence, even if you go and you dilute it down in a lab, because it was derived from a natural source, you can claim it as natural. So you can see how there's no one policing the police. You know what I mean?
It's like trying to get a toxicology report from the DMV and trying to get something that's totally systemic out of them. It's the same thing when you're going to these environmental working group desks. They're filing papers in a crazy way, and you're trying to ask them about something that's totally systemic, and they're like, "Sorry, where's my stapler?" So you
Yeah.
have to take that into account. The dogma, or the red tape, or that these groups work under as well. There are these pseudo government groups, and the way that they organize themselves, they're not really interested in total holistics. They're only
Yeah.
interested in what serves their narrative. And I mean, we do need some sort of collective
Of course.
policing or inspiration to stay on course and to do things in an organized way for the good of all. But
Mhm.
sometimes these groups, they're kind of like trying to pick a number at the DMV.
So I want to trail into the xanthan gum because that's in so many products. Excuse me. It is used to make the products spreadable. It helps to retain moisture. And xanthan gum isn't necessarily a toxicity issue, right? If you go to the environmental working group, you will say, oh, well, this is very low on the carcinogenic measure, and it's really not a problem for the earth, and there's no toxic measure that's going to interfere with waterways or what have you. But going back to what we talked about with regards to the monocropping, the NPK fertilizer, that xanthan gum is a polysaccharide, and it is grown using corn. So again, that genetically modified corn, right, with all of the missing nutrients is being used to create that xanthan gum. And you are putting that xanthan gum on your face. And also, too, even though it's not a toxicology or a toxicity issue, it is a substitution issue because that product is designed to make things spreadable, keep moisture locked in, but then it's bypassing your body's ability to retain its own moisture. And just like when you do a whole lot of things for someone else and they start to get lazy and fall off, they're like, "Ah, I'm not going to do that anymore." Your terrain begins to say, oh, well, we have this xanthan gum coming in, so we don't really have to worry about keeping moisture. So again, a different reframe on toxicology, right? Because when you have that transepidermal water loss, it's changing the whole terrain. You're changing the whole terrain.
Yeah, I think instead of toxic, it should be in service to my system. In service to my
Mm.
whole system is when toxins are able to be metabolized. Not to say I'm not trying to say like, yeah, dump toxins in my drink. I'm good.
Yeah.
It's not like that, but in service to the system should be on top of the priority list. As you are talking about xanthan gum and you're talking about moisture locking in and the barrier, and then we're talking about vitamin C, and we're talking about all these aspects of corn, and then we've got glycos or excuse me, I can never
Glyphosate. Yeah.
glyphosate in the mix. It's
And
all
hey,
the
fertilizer.
perfect green storm going on that nobody looked at with with scrutiny. Then in most green skincare regimes, hyaluronic acid is and I think
Yeah.
maybe this is what I'm gonna like people are starting to be like, that's the girl that's talking shit about hyaluronic acid, right? I'm stirring up the pot
It's in
here with hyaluronic
everything.
acid. What?
It's in everything though, so you
Yes,
can't
that's
not
what I'm
talk
getting at.
about it.
That's what I'm getting at. It's in absolutely everything. In someone's clean beauty routine, I would be willing to bet that hyaluronic acid is in, if they're using 10 products, right? And
Mhm.
10 green products, I'd be willing to bet that it is in 7 to 9 of them. And hyaluronic acid, you make hyaluronic acid on the inside, and it is an endogenous chemical, and it works to create moisture in the way that the universe designed you to create moisture, right? And so when you
Mhm.
add a hyaluronic element to your exogenous skin, then what it's going to do is it's going to absolutely waterboard your tissue osmotically. It's going to take your tissues and have them
Swell them.
soak up moisture and swell.
Mhm.
And as that occurs, the body then starts to go offline with its own universe given hyaluronic template. And it starts needing the hyaluronic from the outside. And when you waterboard your tissues like that, let's go into a microscope together and let's look at that. We're adding hyaluronic acid, it's soaking up. The fibers of your tissues are stretching out and bloating in a way that they're not naturally supposed to. So that
Mhm.
over time is going to cause that kind of glassy skin look that everyone who's obsessed with products gets. It's like this way in which the skin starts losing its intelligence.
Yeah.
And so when we look at the perfect cocktail, if we were going to do an audit in any clean girlies medicine cabinet, we would find a vitamin C product with isolated ascorbic acid. We would find a hyaluronic acid pretty much in everything. And then we would also say, oh, looks like the bureaucratic office says this is green and who cares? But
Right.
really, let's go back to system. And we have disrupted the system to the point where clean beauty loses its mystique as the nursery rhyme that we've all been told, the lullaby that's been lulling us to safety. It's missing. It's like the fourth wall. We just broke the fourth wall on the whole lullaby.
You had talked about what hyaluronic acid does to the tissues, stretching it, right? Because we're waterboarding the skin, we're pushing a ton of moisture in to give that smooth, glassy look. Isn't it interesting, though, that a lot of the electrolyte powders or drink powders now have collagen and hyaluronic acid? So, to Lauren's point, you have this
Yes.
hyaluronic acid being driven into the tissues, spreading that out, and collagen is supposed to come in and tighten it up. But that's from a very superficial perspective, right? Are they putting in the collagen to counter the effects?
And I also want to add to one of the agencies or one of the labels we didn't
Mm.
mention yet grass, and I have in my
Oh,
final notes here. Hyaluronic acid holds a grass generally regarded as safe, which is a food based metric. And
yes.
it holds a GRAS designation, and it borrows from the standard of ingesting and applies it to a high concentration topical and then tries to make an equivalent. And so, to your point of all of those electrolyte supplements, they're
Mhm.
also GRAS. But when you take a high concentration and then you put it on the skin, you the metric is upside down and backwards to begin with, and the math doesn't math there, and they're
Right.
fitting the math in a little square peg in a round hole to try and make it equate, but it doesn't actually equate. And then one of my favorite scientists, Dr. Lauren Pickert, who studied, now let's get into peptides real quick. We'll just take a real quick detour tour to set the stage here. He is the godfather of the GHKCU peptide that he found endogenously in the human body. And he found it
Copper
in the
peptide.
70s. And he did a bunch of research. And in his research, he was like, oh shit, I'm going up against the Rockefellers here and figuring out the cheat code on how the body can regenerate. So I'm going to have to maybe work my research through skincare. So he created a skincare line, and he also did a bunch of research with hyaluronic acid, and he was an absolute no for hyaluronic acid because he dove very deep into the literature. And I have a couple of points here. His body of research connects high molecular weight hyaluronic acid to tumor proliferation and growth. Cancer cells use hyaluronic rich tissue environments to grow and mitigate. Hyaluronic acid creates the conditions for proliferative activity, and the industry's push towards high concentration topical hyaluronic acid creates precisely that kind of tissue environment. This is the record scratch of the lullaby mic drop that nobody wants to listen to, and everyone's like, what is she talking about? She must be crazy. Wait a minute. Because we're really, by saying this, turning the industry a little sideways, maybe a lot sideways, totally upside down, you know?
Few spins.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we have to look at this. Now, I'm not saying, and Dr. Pickert sure isn't saying that like hyaluronic acid equates cancer indefinitely, like some sort of persistent chemical that the environmental working group is like, binocularing around in their field studies with. But in the body, when the body is not systemically healthy and you
Mhm.
put that on top of it and you
With
put that
repeated
in.
exposure.
Yep, and you already have a little hot mess of a fire going on, and you're just holding on because the body does equalize, so you can hold on with those conditions for years, and then some
Mhm.
sort of stress can topple it over. So if you're super metabolically flexible, you're able to recycle yourself, your minerals are in constant movement and they are regenerating and recycling, and your circadian timing is impeccable, then you might not really toss the cart with your hyaluronic acid in your 9 out of 10 products. But if things are on edge, the research is deep, y'all, in terms of mechanism, but the system doesn't make those equations. The system begets itself. So this multi-billion dollar industry, and this, I mean, we're spilling tea here. This multi-billion dollar industry that is the beauty industry, and then the nutraceutical industry that is like the swanky cousin of the pharmaceutical industry. And he's just like, no, I'm cool, right? All of its billions of dollars working together to kind of keep you as a customer. And so the seriously kind of anarchy green thing that you can do is be a system in total balance that isn't prey for these hidden caveats in the multi-billion dollar uh, business model.
And that requires you being astute, which is why we're happy that you're here.
Yeah.
So, most of these agencies are looking at ingredients or passing them in a solo form. They're not taking into account all individual ingredients, 12 ingredients, 15 ingredients. I mean, sometimes you look at the bottle of a clean product and you're looking at it, wow, this is a lot. This is a lot of stuff. No one is taking into account what that chemical cocktail is doing altogether, even a natural cocktail, right? Everything has a cause and effect. Everything has a reaction to it. Just think of middle school science class when you're putting baking soda and vinegar together. It's like separately, they're fine. You put it together and you have this very cool explosion coming down the beaker,
Yeah.
right? So think about it that way too, because products, even natural, even the ones that are deemed safe, they interact with each other. And that is not something that is looked at.
Yeah. So if you're going to have your vitamin C, you're going to start your morning off with your vitamin C and your hyaluronic acid, and you're not metabolically flexible, and you are in an office 8 hours a day, not getting any sunshine in the summer, you are behind the eight ball of eight balls. If I was like a fairy that wanted to design the green community and their standards, and I would do an audit and say, let me design your rule book, I would say, we shouldn't really formulate with hyaluronic acid. You make hyaluronic acid. I don't formulate with hyaluronic acid. I would not formulate with hyaluronic acid. And the more we go back to our evolutionary biology and evolutionary materials that we grew up with in the
Mhm.
form of evolution from generation to generation, we can get back to systemic wholeness. And if we take endogenous things, even copper peptides, which that's the only peptide is currently on my yes list, but I make copper peptide when I feast and fast. That's what I'm trying to do when I feast and fast. I'm trying to raise my own copper peptides instead of taking them exogenously. I'm training my body to get back to factory settings. And
Yeah.
that's what longevity is. And that's what everyone is chasing. And they're chasing it through products and supplements and peptides and crazy things. You have all the materials. The universe is super smart. You're designed like a Bugatti. You just gotta learn how to drive it.
When is that beauty hack gonna take hold and run the airways? The fact that you can make all of the things internally by getting in sync with your natural environment. No one talks about that. They
Yeah.
spend what 200 and what did we say it was $205 billion trying to get that in a bottle when you have access to it and the benefits are long lasting.
Yeah, we were taught that like green good, plants good, animals weird, dirty. No, I want to give them a sweater and have them be my pet, you know. I love animals too, but the the system of you mirrors the system of earth. The system of earth moves in interoperable kingdoms. Plants
Mhm.
can't be um exalted without animal. Animal can't be um, exalted without mineral. Everything works together in symbiosis, and the new green is coming to that understanding, I think.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Yeah. So, shall we do our verdicts on the
Yeah.
clean beauty?
Yep.
I want to say read the ingredient list. Don't just look at the little that's there. I do have some products that are natural, as Lauren and I were talking about. I do have some things that are not natural. I am always going to look at things through the lens of balance and what season am I in? One of the things that I always tell my clients is good, better, best. Good, better, best. If you're in a good place with this thing and it is better than what you were doing, great. That's how I approach my life as well. I am also not going to go out of my way to fill my shopping cart with every green, natural item. I'm just not going to. I'm going to focus more on my metabolism, getting whole foods in, light. That is my form of green beauty.
I'm going to be really forthcoming in my verdict and explain from the angle of one of my formulas. I make a serum of emu, and it is whole food vitamin C, and it comes from cacao plum and rosehip. But I also add in cyclomethicone and dimethicone, but a small amount of dimethicone and a more of a cyclomethicone, which evaporates on contact. But however, the clean beauty world thinks that it's like, sorry, you're kicked out of the party. That's a no. We don't love this ingredient. In fact, why do you use this ingredient? It may, because of the small percentage, be hindering some of like the big dosage of vitamin C and the emu oil, which is pure nutrients. But the reason why it's in there is because it fills in lines because it's an eye serum and you can, put a concealer over it. So that's my verdict. Sometimes you have to look at an ingredient as a total picture and not as something. I mean, like, I'm maybe shunned by some green people because of this thing. And I think that I stand by it. You know what I'm saying? I've been like, should I reformulate? And I'm like, you know what? No, I stand by it. I've looked into the persistent chemicals in the environment. I've looked into the persistence of the chemicals in you. With that substrate, I'm going to tell you my verdict is you have to examine it from multiple different angles. So in the same way that Heidi is like, some of my stuff isn't 100% green. It doesn't have the bunny label on it. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm not necessarily saying that when I'm formulating because I'm being really deliberate with every choice, but I can show my work on the equation. My verdict is it's yes and I even apply it in my work because it has to be looked at from a deeper angle than just an agency that closes at 4:30 and has weird rules, right? And we're all obsessed with like their gold stickers that they give everybody.
As we bring this case into focus, the question was never just, what are we keeping out of the bottle? It was always, why is the body the one terrain the clean movement never thought to account for? No certification, whether it be vegan, cruelty-free, or green-sourced, will override metabolic depletion. A green label is a marketing choice. Biological compatibility is a completely different standard. The terrain inside you has its own requirements, and no clean beauty checklist was built around that. But this file isn't necessarily closed. What did we miss? What deserves a second look? Your perspective may just shape the next investigation.